Now, my next guest is Shamim Sarif. And Shamim, I'm delighted to say that the world premiere of Polarized, which is the fifth film from Shamim, from the critically acclaimed British film director, took place at the BFI Flare on London's South Bank last Saturday, the 18th of March, followed by a second screening the following day. Now, what is it all about? Well, Polarized is a tale of queer love in a small town that unfolds against a backdrop of sweeping Canadian prairies. Wild Rose meets Brokeback Mountain, I'm told. This slow burn tale tells of struggling singer-songwriter from a poor farming community coming to terms with her queer identity and the barriers thrown up by family, religion, race and community. Shamim joins me by Zoom this afternoon. Shamim, it's lovely to talk to you and lovely to see you as well. How are you?
Thank you so much. It's absolutely lovely to be here. And what a great intro. I feel like I don't need to say anything else now.
I wrote it myself. Shamim, just when you talk about Canadian prairies and a love story, it just goes hand in hand, doesn't it?
I think so. I mean, there's something very iconic about that setting. You know, we've seen that sort of North American field of dreams in so many different movies in the past. But really, this story was one about two young women who live in the same town, but really do not live in the same world, if you like. So, even though it's a very tiny town, they really are separated by race, religion, culture, all of those things that you'd like to think in 2023 don't matter so much, but that seem to do so. So Lisa is from a white farming family who've recently lost their farm, and she goes to work for a new style vertical farm, which is a very scientific place owned by a Palestinian immigrant family. And it's the daughter of that family that first fires Lisa, and then eventually they end up actually forming a friendship and falling in love. So there were a lot of things to explore there, not least immigration.
Okay, let's talk about the whole side of the love side firstly. And you can probably tell from the accent that I'm not Spanish or I'm not British. I'm from Ireland. And one of the big things that has come to the fore over the last 20, 25 years in Ireland, as gay rights got a lot more traction, is that, being gay in a very small Irish village is not a nice place to be for anybody. And so when I saw this, I immediately thought about Ireland and about the small little tight-knit communities, particularly the religious element of it. How difficult is it for the two women to deal with that in a small setting?
I think it is very difficult, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I think even though this is a specific setting in small town North America, it's so relevant for, small places all over Europe, Ireland, as you mentioned, England to an extent. So I think the difficulty, I think, is that it's almost like getting used to it in a way. I don't want to say that people in small towns have any particular bias there, but it's almost a lack of exposure, I think, to people. And also, as you say, with the religious community, there can be a tendency, not always, but there can be a tendency to cling to traditions and ideas that, maybe have made it difficult in the past to be openly gay or queer. And I think that's something that I've been familiar with from my background, not small town Irish, but brought up in the UK to Indian Muslim parents. It wasn't exciting for them when I decided to come out. And I met my wife, Hanan, 27 years ago. We've been together now, and she's from a Christian Palestinian family. So having that kind of cross-religious, cross-cultural issue is something that's very present to us. And I think it's a shame that it's still an issue today.
Were you drawing from that experience in some of what we see in Polarized?
Yes, I was drawing a little bit from that. And I think it was, again, in a different context, but I think interesting to explore those realities, because it has been a while, but we're still seeing some of the same issues. I think also what was interesting for me was to explore a Palestinian tale that had a Palestinian family in it, which is something that's very close to my experience through my wife, but that wasn't about dispossessed immigrants in a refugee camp, which is often the narrative that we see for Palestinians or terrorists, and that showed Palestinians as a very educated, successful, scientifically aware group in this particular family, because that is the story for a lot of the Palestinian diaspora.
And again, being Irish, I can relate to that particular one. There's yes, as you say, it's not just for Palestine or the Palestinians. It's in a number of different communities as you go across the world. You said at one point there that, there are a number of things going on here that you're examining. Talk to me a little bit more about that, about what the messages are in the movie.
Yes, I think a lot of it at its core is that we need to think about how we're judging people, based on what are fairly superficial aspects, whether it is your race or religion. I think the story talks about that. I think it talks about how we can take steps to break out of cultures that maybe are very ingrained in us, because Lisa is ingrained with her evangelical Christian upbringing. And it has, made her very uncertain about expressing her sexuality. She's also ingrained with a kind of distrust of the Palestinian community that have moved in to this countryside. But actually getting to know each other in the course of this film, Lisa and Dahlia actually learn to step outside those boundaries and realize that actually, as human beings, they can relate on a much deeper level than anything they experience at home in their own families. So I think that's one of the things. And I think there are very specific elements in this movie, like conversion therapy, which are addressed, because Lisa has to undergo a form of intervention at church, which is very stressful for her. And is the final straw in her having to say, okay, I need to pull away from her family. And that's something that is still very legal in the US in more than a majority of states, and was only banned in Canada in 2022, which is where we shot the movie. So, there's still work to do. And I think the rights of women, the rights of the LGBTQ plus community are being quite politicized by politicians right now. And it's a good time to be vigilant, that we don't lose sight of what all of this is about and relating to each other as people with empathy, rather than just being used as political conversation points.
Why was Canada chosen to be the home of this?
I think because, I am Canadian and British. And so, when I went, Canada was a natural place for me to explore, to shoot. I shot a lot there. And when we went to Manitoba, which is right in the Canadian prairies, I think it really felt cinematic to me. It felt like the perfect setting for this kind of a story, because although it's a small independent film, we wanted it to look gorgeous on the screen. We wanted it to have that CinemaScope feel, getting as much of that production value, if you like, on the screen as we could. It's what we like to do in all of our films. So it wasn't a difficult decision to make, to go there to shoot that.
Is there ever a situation when you're directing a film like this that something just isn't working? The script looks good, the actors are doing their best, but as the director, you're looking at it thinking, no. This is not doing what I wanted to do, or it's doing something completely opposite to what we wanted to do. Have you situations like that, and were there situations like this on this particular set?
I think what helps me with that and avoiding it from the beginning is being the writer and director. And I've got a certain amount of experience now. This is my fifth film, so I think I felt that more in earlier films sometimes when you're trying to But I think here I was a little bit more prepared. Having said that, feeling like there are issues. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
There are issues all over the place when you're writing. Being on a film set is about firefighting, to be honest with you. There's always, because there's so many, as you're right, there's so many moving parts. An actor might be struggling with a particular moment. The camera truck hasn't shown up, or there were certainly, we had our fair share of challenges on this movie with a sort of inexperienced crew. So for me, being prepped in terms of the characters, the story, what each moment is about is very important. And then you can firefight when all of these things happen and you realize that you have to shoot that scene in an hour instead of in 2.5 hours or whatever. So there's a good training. And I'm married to a producer, so she's trained me very well in dealing with crises without panicking.
That must be a fun household. When anybody hears about the two words world premiere, we automatically think red carpets and grandeur and splendor and fashion and oh darling and all of that. So tell me about the event last Saturday on the South Bank.
Well, it was, I always like to scream darling at everybody as I'm walking in, but I was relieved of having to wear my black tie guess up because it wasn't a red carpet. I think that tends to be reserved for Cannes and the very big things. It's not always the case, but it was a very beautiful premiere. I think it was packed out, which was great. The both screenings sold out. They put up another one next Sunday, actually, at the NFT. And it was really wonderful. I think what's great about festivals and festivals like Flare is that you've got an audience who are there to watch the film and are really engaged. And Polarized really got a fantastic reception. And when 90% of people stay for the Q&A, you've done something right. So I felt good about it. It was great.
Oh, lovely. I didn't realize there was a Q&A afterwards, and that went well, obviously.
Yes, it did. Yeah, it was really great. Some really good questions, I think, about the themes of the movie and how we shot it, because, there's some beautiful drone shots in there. There's a lot of prairie landscapes and also the urban farm is a visual. So there's a lot of incredible music in the film. So we've got some Palestinian rap in there. We've got great country artists like Roseanne Cash. Oh, wow. So there were lots of beautiful contrasts in the film, if I say so myself. And I do, that people wanted to chat about. So it was really great.
What was the highlight for people? What was the thing you heard most about the film on the night?
I think that it has, it's a small film but it has a big heart. And I think people really warm to the message of hope, that because although you're bringing up, issues like the things that are keeping us apart, the stresses around immigration, which is such a big part of our news now, the taboos around being LGBT in a certain culture, or certain cultures. And I think after all of that, what Polarized says is there's not that much standing in the way of us breaking down those boundaries and finding love or finding connection or finding friendship. And I think that's a much needed temperature in the world right now. After you get tired of reading the news, come and watch Polarized.
Did you write it for film, or did you write it and then decide to film it?
I wrote it for film, which is unusual for me because I'm also a novelist. Several of my previous films have been adapted from my own novels, despite The Falling Snow, The World Unseen. But with Polarized, I went straight to screenplay because it was very much inspired at that moment that Trump was elected and then Brexit happened. I don't know if you remember. It just felt...
the world ended. Happy, yeah.
For certain of us, we felt a bit in the depths of despair. So so my response was to think about this story and really try to put some of the concerns that I had into that story, and also to suggest a way past it with some characters who were able to grow during the course of this film and think, hey, life doesn't need to be like this.
Where does the film go now then?
Well, we'll have a general release in the UK and Europe later in the year. We don't have dates for that yet. And next we'll go over to Canada. We've got a world premiere going on there on the 1st of April, and then it'll be on general release in Canada in the summer. So hopefully there's still a long life to go, more festivals and full releases everywhere. But people can stay tuned to my social media, which is Shamim Sarif or at Polarized Movie, just to see where we'll be.
All righty. Are you very proud of it?
Do you know I am? It was really, it was quite a difficult shoot. I think it was one of the more difficult ones that Helen and I have done together. And we were really tired afterwards and felt, but then you get into the editing and the making of it. And when you see that with an audience and you see that responses that you get, you just think, yeah, actually it is really worth it. I think that's always been our we've never made life easy for ourselves. We've always told stories about women of color, often queer characters, and they haven't been the easiest to finance. But, it really is worth it because we get such an outpouring of support from people for this one and for previous films that you think, you're feeling something that needs to be told.
How does it work then, the dynamic working together and having a life together? Is it difficult?
It's not difficult.
Hang on, should I ask your wife maybe?
You should. Right. Because I always think the producer gets the brunt end of everything. It's the director. At the end of the day, you have a lot of work, but you get to stand up there and take the applause. And the actors, of course, everybody loves them, but the producers kind of get shoved in the back a little bit, and they have by far the hardest task. But for me, it's a dream. Look, we decided to work together. She was not in the film industry. I kind of dragged her into it. She's an entrepreneur. She's always had her own brands, her own companies. And then I presented her with a bunch of screenplays that were about women of color. And she's like, oh, great, this will be fine. And then, of course, everybody's like, that's very difficult. Yeah. But she's stuck with it. And we've made 5 features and a documentary. And we've got a slate of productions now under our Enlightenment Productions banner. Again, sticking with our core theme of women in front of and behind the camera, but for series for television as well as films.
What's next?
Next for me, I'm going over to Canada to shoot a few TV shows, sort of for HBO Max. And then in the meantime, we're developing our own projects. I've just finished writing a pilot script for Village Roadshow and Gran Via over in America. No. And that's an adaptation of my own novels, The Athena Protocol, which were recently out with HarperCollins. So keeping busy.
Fantastic. Good to hear it. Good to hear it. Shamim Sarif, thank you so much for joining us on the programme today, talking about Polarized. When it does go on general release in Europe, hopefully our listeners will get to see it, and I will get to see it as well. And look forward to that. And listen, continued success to you and your wife and everybody involved with the productions.
Thank you. That's very kind. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Delighted to talk to you. Thanks a million.